The Get Rich Slow Club podcast is a collaboration between Tash Etchman from Tash Invest and Ana Christina from Perla. The Get Rich Slow Club acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. From coast to coast, across land, waters, and communities, we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's appropriate for you.
Welcome to the Get Rich Slow Club podcast,
where we take you from beginner to confident investor.
where we can teach you everything you need to know about investing.
So come get rich slow with us.
Today, we are going to be chatting about the cost of relocating for a job and how you've increased your salary from 50K to a lot more in only a few years, I've heard. I'm here today with Harry. Do you want to say a little intro of who you are?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm a big listener of the podcast and your content on TikTok. So really grateful to be in the room with you. And a bit about myself. I'm 25 years old, living in Melbourne. I work as a buyer's advocate. So I help first home buyers and family home buyers to purchase property in Melbourne. We work specifically with people who have a budget of less than $2 million. So really that entry-level property in Melbourne. Our sweet spot is actually just under $1 million. And then outside of work, I'm mostly just passionate about real estate, which is actually work, as well as anything financial literacy or education.
Amazing. That was such a good intro. I love that. So many good things.
Thank you.
Do you have a money win or money loss for today?
Yes, money win. July is the first month of our new financial year, and it's actually the most income I've earned in a month for the month of July, and it's not over yet. So that's my money win for the day.
That's amazing. That's so exciting. Congrats.
Thank
Biggest
you.
income month. That's very cool.
Thank you very much.
I feel like more people need to share that because sometimes in Australia, especially, we get a bit of tall poppy syndrome going around and we're like, oh, I don't really want to share that because it might come across a bit negatively. But no, it's very exciting. I love that.
Thank you. I agree with the tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
I wouldn't prance around the street saying it, but for the sake of a podcast, I think it's definitely worth noting.
Are you happy to share what it is, or do you want to keep that kind of more secret?
I think let's keep it secret. Let's not get into specifics, but it's something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah. Well, congrats. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
My money win is less impressive. It's more of a value spend. I spent $25 extra to have the seat next to me free on the bus. And I find it so much more enjoyable when I'm not sitting next to someone. So that's my money win of the week.
Normalize that. Spending more money for comfort.
Yeah.
Big believer in.
Yeah. I hate that bus from Sydney to Canberra. I find it like I would much prefer to fly, but the flights are so expensive. They're like at least $200 and the bus is like $50 maybe. So yeah, it's worth it to make it extra comfortable.
Well, really, you saved almost $150.
Yes. Yeah. If you do it that way. Yeah. And I didn't have to pay for like Ubers to the airport or anything. So definitely adds up. Yes. I've been enjoying that extra seat. So for today's episode, I thought it would be really fun to chat about the cost of relocating and the things we've learned, because I know you've moved from Tasmania and I've moved to so many different places as well. What were you doing in Tasmania?
Yeah, in Tassie. So that's where I grew up. A bit of backstory, I guess. I went to a decent school there and got a good ATAR. And then
what was your ATAR?
Around 90, which is like top 10%, but my attendance would have been like the worst 1% at school. Okay. So it was good, reflective of the effort, I would say. Mm-hmm. Not that that's at all relevant anymore.
God, we don't get to talk about ATARs anymore.
I know, throwback.
Yeah, I think that was the peak of my academic career at high school.
What did you get, like 99?
96.
Oh, amazing.
That's, the peak of it all though.
Great ATAR. But yeah, I then went into university and studied pretty much what everyone studies if they don't know what to do. So I did business and accounting for 3 years. While I was at uni, I acquired a couple properties, which I think we'll talk about in a different episode. And then I got what I thought was my dream graduate position at an accounting firm and decided I didn't like that. And then, that's kind of what I was doing in Hobart.
And what made you want to move? What was the thought process around that?
The thought process around that, in Tassie, it's a really common thing to move to Melbourne or any other state.
Yeah, same with Perth. Like everyone from Perth goes to Melbourne.
Yeah, I wasn't like some wild person just moving states. Pretty much everyone did it. And usually once you would study in Hobart because it's cheap and you live with your family and then you move after that. So it's kind of the done thing. And everyone does it for really similar reasons, which is usually the perceived likelihood of earning more money, better connections, all those type of things, which was pretty similar for me as well. But specific to me, I've always had really big goals. Like I've always set stupid goals almost and given myself a short amount of time to achieve those goals. And so I always just kind of try and optimize my decision making for how can I get to my goal quicker. And I have some big financial goals and I just didn't think that what I was doing in Hobart would get me there. So it was a pretty obvious decision. Like if I move to Melbourne, am I more likely to achieve these goals? To me, it was really an obvious yes. And so I thought, yep, I'm going to move to Melbourne. Amazing.
Do you want to share what some of your goals were or are they personal?
They, at the time, back then, definitely happy to share. I love sharing goals. I think everyone should.
Yeah.
A lot of them were financial. So I've always had this goal since I was like 16. I've been obsessed with that goal setting and that type of stuff. My main goal was to not have to work by the age of 30. I got involved with this movement called the FIRE movement. Have you heard of it? Yeah. So I stumbled on that side of YouTube when I was like 16. I don't know how I ended up there.
Did you watch that random documentary they made of the guy in the US, I think? I can't remember what it was called, but he like moved to this random cabin and was trying to live really frugally and his wife was really unhappy.
Oh my gosh. No, I didn't see that one.
That was the first FIRE I had and I was like 15, 16 when I saw that.
That's an extreme end of the spectrum, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were watching YouTube videos?
Yeah. And probably similar people to that. But people like Graham Stephan, I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, the guy in the US.
Watched everything. Everyone was really based in the US. There was a guy called Nate O'Brien as well. He's all about frugality and that type of stuff. So I got obsessed with this thing called the FIRE movement, which is financially independent, retired early. And my life became centered around how am I going to sacrifice, make a lot of money and save enough money so that by the time I turn 30, I can have the choice to work rather than the need to work. So that was one of my main goals. That's not my goal anymore because I love what I do. So I'm like, I don't want to stop working ever.
I had such a similar journey because I found the FIRE movement really early on as well. And I was like, this is so cool. I want to do this as well. I was so frugal back then. But then I had a bit of a break during COVID and I realized how much I like working and how much I kind of need to work in some capacity. So I think we've been on a similar big journey that way. But I feel like it's so useful to try and have those frugal years and to know what it's like to live really frugally and work really hard towards those goals.
Yeah, I think it's key. And anyone you speak to in the finance space or self-development, like there's not one person who won't say you need to sacrifice for a few years in your youth.
Yeah.
Where it's like the most socially acceptable time to do so.
Yeah.
In order to get to your goal. So big believer of that.
How did you find trying to like Melbourne is expensive to rent in and you were living at home, were you, or you living out of home in Hobart?
So when I moved from Hobart, I was living in a property that I built by myself and paying the mortgage by myself. So it wasn't awfully cheap.
Okay. So it's still expensive.
Yeah. But actually when I moved to Melbourne, massive hack and a bit of a side note, I only would look for properties that were fully furnished apartments where someone lived there and they had a spare bedroom and they're just renting out the spare room so that I didn't have to buy anything to put in the apartment.
Yes.
And they would often be like cheaper than what you could find online because it's just like they just view it as their spare room. So when I moved here, my first rental was $1,000 a month. And my second one was pretty similar. I think it might have been closer to 1,100, but both good apartments, 2 bed, 2 bath. So I had my own bathroom, my own bedroom, and the cost of living crisis was kind of avoided by that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because people always ask me how I move so often because I've kind of bounced around a few different cities, but that's such a hack when you're not taking a whole house of furniture with you. Like you are just taking your clothes and whatever stuff you need and you're renting a room, and even like some of them come completely furnished with a bed or whatever. So that's such a good way to go and try something out before you commit to moving across like a whole house full of furniture. I finished my apartment that I lived in Perth fully, but now I rent it out fully furnished. So I didn't have to like move all of that stuff, which has been good.
Nice. That's a hack as well. And you can get more money, I assume, for a fully furnished apartment.
Yeah.
And you have to pay for storage or sell it.
Yeah. And sometimes people don't want to leave because like the furniture's there. They don't want to have to move to buy more furniture, which has been good.
That's a hack.
Yeah. I just got someone new in recently, but they're really keen on a longer term few year lease now because they're just like all settled, which is awesome.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. But that's such a good way to move, find a room that's fully furnished.
Yeah. And on the flip side, it's a good thing to do from an investment standpoint, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. To try it, especially when there's more, because it's an apartment, I think it puts it above the rest of them when one is furnished. Like if you're trying to pick between 3 similar ones, if they're all up at the same time and you're like, oh, well, this one is nicely furnished. Because I did get like nice matching furniture. It wasn't just like random IKEA stuff. Like it presents really well. And it's easier to show people the apartment when you see it with furniture because otherwise it just looks really small. I find when you're viewing things and you're like, how is a whole apartment going to fit in here?
Completely agree.
How much did you spend on moving?
So this was when I was very involved in the FIRE movement and very frugal man. So the short answer is not much. So as I said, I was living in that house by myself, but I furnished it myself with Facebook Marketplace furniture. And to fund my move, I just sold everything I had in my house.
Amazing. Perfect.
Yeah. And I knew I was going to move into a furnished apartment. So my only cost was getting a ferry from Tassie to Melbourne, and I only bought what I could fit in my car.
What car do you have? A small one or a big one?
Yeah, a little Mazda CX-3.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was literally my clothes. For some reason, I bought my coffee machine, like a bit of an oversight. I could have just sold it and bought a similar one.
No, you need coffee machine essentials.
And a keyboard, like a piano.
Oh, do you play the piano?
Yeah. And that was, I spent a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
So they were the important things to me. So all it cost me was my ferry ticket, which I paid for with all the stuff I just sold. And actually, I probably made money from moving to Melbourne in a weird way because my furniture was worth more than what it cost in the ferry ticket.
And how much was your living expenses back then? I guess if you had a mortgage, do you have a rough how much you were spending each week?
Yes, it was. I was getting paid at the time around $3,400 a month, and I wasn't saving any money. I was being as frugal as I could to just live paycheck to paycheck basically. So my mortgage repayments were $1,200 a month, and I owned another property at the same time. There was a bit of a shortfall at that time, so that may be a few $100s a month. And the remainder got me up to $3,400. So groceries. I like to drink a little bit back then. Okay. So going out, I was 22 years old.
Yeah. Fair.
My monthlies would have been the same as my income, about 3.5.
Okay. And then when you moved, you ended up spending what you were saying, $1,000 a month on rent. So, and selling all the stuff, it sounds like it worked out really well. Because when you think about moving to Melbourne, it seems quite expensive, but it seems like you did it really well.
It sounds expensive. I think it's interesting because my life was probably more expensive than the average 22-year-olds in Hobart. In terms of a lot of my friends lived at home, so they didn't have that mortgage repayment.
Oh, yeah.
So my base was already kind of high. And when I moved to Melbourne, it was probably similar. I think everything is a little bit more expensive here, but I tried to save on the big ticket items like rent and those type of things. My fuel's subsidized by work, and my lifestyle is drastically different in Melbourne in that I had no friends here. I wasn't going out. My social expenses were nothing. So I think it cost more to live here, but I kind of adjusted other areas of my life. So it was kind of neutral.
Yeah, it all evens out. Yeah, because it's hard when you have a group of friends who are drinking a lot and you want to be part of the social circle. You want to go out for dinners and do whatever they're doing. So I guess starting again fresh makes it a bit easier, and you can just go back for weekends or something to say hi to them. Yeah,
exactly. Your expenses kind of reset and you work out what's really important and what you can get your baseline to as a minimum.
Yeah. What's your minimum? Have you worked that out?
It's very different now.
Very different, yeah. When you first moved, I guess if you were spending $1,000 on rent, do you have any other expenses, a few $100s on bills every now and then?
Yeah. I reckon my monthlies, they were similar when I first moved. Yeah, around 3,000 is probably the lowest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's what it was.
I don't know. I haven't been budgeting properly in the last year or two, so I'm not sure what mine would cost me. But yeah, that seems fine with rent, all the other stuff too, if you're paying for your mortgage and your other properties as well. Side note, we're going to do another episode after this. It'll come out in a few weeks, all about Harry's property journey, and it's amazing. So you should definitely tune into that one. You mentioned not having friends initially. I have lots of people message me on Instagram saying they're scared about moving because they're scared about not being able to make new friends. How have you found that transition?
I would say I have a lot of highlights from moving from Hobart to Melbourne, but increasing my network in terms of friends outside of work is probably not one of them. I'm not the guy to lean on for that, I wouldn't say. I fully optimize my life at the moment around work, earning more money, being able to have as much money as possible to save and invest. And as a result, I wouldn't say I prioritize my time to spend making new friends. I think that's probably the biggest sacrifice I make today. So when I was earning less money, the biggest sacrifice I would make would be, working a lot and probably having less money to go and see my friends. Now all I do is work, and the biggest sacrifice is that I give almost everything else up for that. So if you need advice on making new friends when you move to Melbourne, I'm probably not the person to ask. I just think I'm in a phase of my life where I've made a conscious choice to do that, and everything else is kind of going to the wayside now. It seems like the first thing that I could get rid of almost is allocating time for that.
Yeah.
Which sounds probably really harsh, but it's just like the reality.
Yeah. It's not as harsh with like, now that I kind of know your background, like you said, you lived with your partner, you obviously work in a very social job where you're talking to people all day. Do you kind of get home and you're a bit over people anyway? And you're like, oh, I'm ready to just like sit by myself now.
Yeah, definitely during the week. I mean, we work pretty decent hours during the week, and I come home and try and spend as much quality time with my partner as I can because he's a really busy person too, and so am I. So whenever I've got a night free, we'll kind of optimize to spend time together because that really is the only time. I work Saturdays, so we don't get one of the weekends
on Saturdays.
yeah, exactly. So I don't get Saturdays with my partner. I don't drink, so Saturday night I don't go out and see friends because I'm kind of in that stage of life where a lot of my friends are still drinking. Mm-hmm. So that kind of rules out seeing people on a Saturday night. I could go sober. I'm just like...
No, it's not fun. Yeah, I don't really drink that much anymore either. And it is, challenging because going in that environment when you're not drunk is just a bit gross.
Yeah. Like I say, I physically could do it, but I just don't want to do it. And then, Sunday... I'm pretty into my fitness. I spend like the first half of the day running, and then
you run so fast. I see your was it Strava? Your Strava screenshots. I'm so impressed.
Thank you so much.
Speedy. And you run so far as well.
Thank you. Not fast at all. Okay. But like I'm trying to build up distance.
It looks fast to me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I spend my Sunday pretty much getting ready for the work week ahead and spending time with my partner. So when you allocate all that time, it's like I don't really have that much time to make new friends.
Do you still go back to Hobart to see your other friends?
Yes, probably twice or 3 times a year.
Okay, yeah. I find I go back to Perth quite often, but I think because I have a job where I can work anywhere, I don't have to be physically in Melbourne or anything like that. But it definitely adds on to the cost as well if you're considering relocating, like budgeting in those flights, especially around Christmas time. But I guess you can just drive, so it makes it a bit easier.
Yeah, well, you can jump on the ferry back to Hobart, but it's actually not at all cost effective.
How much is the ferry?
I think to move here is about $1,000 with my car.
What?
Yeah, but I made the decision to move and then move like a month later, so it wasn't very, very far in advance.
Yeah.
But it's you would fly if you could.
It would be so much cheaper. What?
Yeah, if you bring your car, it's more expensive.
Yeah.
And then I'm a little bit particular, so I got a room for the night on the ferry. Whereas if you did it really budget, just yourself and not a room, just like a seat, I think maybe $300.
Is it an overnight ferry?
Yeah. It's 12 hours.
Oh my! I didn't know that.
Okay, it's not just fly. Like good.
I thought I knew it would be a solid chunk, but not 12 hours.
Yeah. I'd recommend flying. Even you can't bring your car down, but it'd actually be cheaper and more effective to fly and then get a hire car for a few days than to bring your own car down there.
Yeah, no, that's why I didn't think it'd be that expensive because I've seen Jetstar flights on special and they're pretty cheap to fly from Melbourne to Hobart with Jetstar. But no, I went on a cruise earlier in the year from Melbourne to Hobart and it was so rough and I got so seasick. So I'm not going to get the ferry ever.
Yeah, don't recommend to a friend. Only if you're moving. Like if it's a logistical reason, for sure, do it.
Yeah.
But if you're like going to just visit somewhere, sorry, do not get on the Spirit of Tasmania.
No, crazy. I want to do it one day just as like the experience. But I think the more I hear about it, the more I'm like, no.
Yeah, so fair.
I think it's such an important point that you were saying about moving and kind of resetting your life and your friendships and picking who you want to be around you. Like I find it so hard. Like I love going back to Perth, but it is interesting when you kind of try and slip back in with other people's lives and you realize how different your life is when you move. And when you are trying to do that back home, it can be quite hard to change because everyone expects you to be the same. But when you move, you've got this whole fresh start and you can meet all these new people. And I found that's been such a good point in my journey, being able to meet people who are doing amazing things. Like I thought I would never write a book. I was like, that sounds horrendous. I don't want to do that. But then all of a sudden, everyone around me started writing books. So the idea of writing one just became like, oh, it's this thing that all my friends do. I can do it too. So it's so good being able to meet new people like that and expand your networks in that way. And I'm sure you've met so many people through work as well that are doing amazing things.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key to growth is that you can only grow as much as your environment will let you. And if you feel limited by your environment or you think there's more like on the other side, I would so encourage you if you're thinking about moving somewhere for that extra growth, like, as you say, it's worked for you and it's definitely worked for me. So I think that's something that's really important to consider. And then, in work, we're really lucky that we're dealing with people who have the capacity to buy a $1 to $2 million property. So we're dealing on the client side of things with really intelligent, hardworking people, which is really rewarding. And then on the agent side, so I source all the properties from real estate agents. A lot of them are making like $1 million or more a year. And so they're high net worth individuals as well. And I think that's why I love it so much. Like everyone I'm talking to, on the client side, they're really financially motivated. They've got goals. They're buying property. They're frugal, all of those things. They're first-home buyers. They're not just like bazillionaire investors. They're first-home buyers who have saved and then buy property.
Yeah.
And then on the agent side, I get to speak to all these high-income earners who are really, really driven.
Yeah, and it just becomes so normalized when everyone around you is doing it. You're like, oh, this is for me, compared to when you're back home and everyone's just working the same jobs. And you're like, oh, okay, like 80 grand a year, that sounds good. Versus now it is so normalized, which is amazing.
Yeah, it really changes your like baseline level, I think.
Yeah.
Like what I would consider high income now is drastically different to what I would consider 2 years ago when I was in Hobart.
Yeah, lots of my friends are OTs, occupational therapists. And like when you're a senior OT, you maybe get like 120, maybe max 150 if you're lucky. And that's kind of like higher income for that role. Whereas now I talk to people like you or mortgage brokers and hear about their commissions. And it's just, insane comparing the two. And like OT requires a lot of hard work. And like, sure, all this stuff does as well, but it's very different and like less emotionally taxing, but you can earn so much more.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to touch on is that it's commission. Like that's the main difference. There are people undoubtedly that work harder than real estate agents or buyers advocates who enjoy their job more maybe, but because they're limited to an hourly wage or a salary, they will never make more than a real estate agent or anyone else in a commission role. And that also links back to one of the main reasons I moved to Melbourne to pursue real estate is because I was working in an accounting firm at the time in Hobart, and no matter how many hours I worked, I was getting the same wage.
Yeah.
And I just had this epiphany like, whoa, what if I could be paid based on how hard I work?
Yeah.
Because one thing I don't have a problem with is like working long hours, working hard to get reward. And I knew if I put the exact same effort into an accounting role, I would get like no return.
Were you saying to me that you were earning 50 grand or something as a new grad accountant, including super?
Yeah,
that's wild.
I think it was either 51 or 53,000 inclusive of super was my starting salary, and I left pretty quickly, so I didn't get any pay rises.
Crazy. Yeah, but it's just so low after you spend ages at uni and you're like qualified to do this job, and especially when you're working somewhere where like you can see how much they're charging clients for work as well. Like that must be so not very motivating. So to wrap up, do you have any tips for anyone who's considering relocating or trying something different?
Yes, I do.
Amazing.
And it's really around changing the question from what's the cost of moving to what's the cost if I don't move?
Oh, I like this.
Yes, I'm so into it. And this has always been my framework around should I move from Hobart to Melbourne? So if anyone's thinking about a similar move, this might be useful. For me, the opportunity cost if I didn't move to Melbourne is massive, and it could outweigh any potential cost of moving. So even if it cost me $10,000 to move from Hobart to Melbourne, my increase in earning capacity in the last 2 years is like 10 times that amount or more. And I think other people could have the exact same result. So your return on investment, if it costs you $10,000 to move from Hobart to Melbourne,
it's massive.
Yeah, it's 1,000% a year.
Yeah.
Every year.
Crazy.
Like in perpetuity, if that's your cap. So it's better than any investment you could make, in my opinion, like the investment in yourself to go outside of your comfort zone, try something new, get a new job, like that type of thing. The return is wild. And actually a lot of people that I listen to, like Alex Hormozy and similar people, talk about the idea of investing in you, which they call the S&P, the S&Me, as opposed to
I've heard that. Oh, nice. I like it.
As opposed to the S&P, and like the returns you can get on that, I just think will far outweigh putting your money anywhere else. So one thing I would encourage people to do is if you're thinking about the cost of moving, flip the question and ask yourself, what's it going to cost me if I don't move? And what am I missing out on by staying in the exact same situation that you must know is not working for you if you're considering moving in the first place?
Amazing. I love that. I think it's so important just to try things as well. Like what's the worst that can happen? You just move back and like life is fine. Like I feel like we always think of these huge worst case scenarios, but you can always change your mind again. And like, I haven't liked some of the places I've tried living. Like I spent a few months renting a room in Bondi and I was like, this is not for me. I don't like buses. I like driving my car around. I don't want to be in this busy part of the world anymore. I tried living in Altona in Melbourne for 6 months and I didn't like that, but like, that's fine. We can just pick up and move again and we'll find somewhere eventually. But it's so good putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions where you have to find new support systems. You can't rely on just like driving to your parents' house for dinner anymore. You have to like find your own network. And I think it's so good just to try those new things. And like meeting new people and seeing things be normalized is so important as well. Like you've been saying, your idea of a high income now is just so different.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you say, what is the worst that can happen? Because I had people in my life who are probably a lot more conservative than I am saying like, oh my God, what are you going to do if it doesn't work out? Like, this is a really big risk you're taking. And in my mind, I'm like, the worst thing that can happen is I move, it's not good, I come back, and the result is I was just doing what I was already doing.
Yeah, you get the same job back or a different job that's similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have people ask me that as well. They're like, oh, it was so risky that you quit your job to do this stuff full time. And I was like, was it like really? Or was it more risky just like earning $100,000 a year as an OT and not really trying anything new and never actually like experimenting? And if you save for it, like if you have an emergency fund, if you have savings, I don't think there's that many risks to trying to like take 6 months or a year and seeing what happens.
Completely agree.
So many good things in this chat. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to do another episode soon all about Harry's property journey. So if you love this one, make sure to look out for that episode as well. But thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you found this episode helpful, please rate us 5 stars, write a review, or share with a friend. If you're new to investing, make sure to listen to our first 10 episodes. Follow us at Get Rich Slow Club or Tash at Tash Invest or me at Ana Christina.
This show was brought to you by Natasha Etchman, who is an authorized representative 1299881 of Guideway Financial Services, AFSL 420367, and Perla, who is an authorized representative 1281540 of Sanlam Private Wealth, AFSL 337927. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to investing. So make sure you check out our financial services guides and read the product disclosure statement and target market determination for any investments you're considering. See our show notes for more info.